International College of Dentists is an honorary organization composed of dentists from throughout the world. The USA section of the college decided to record visually not only the history of the college, but also several leaders in our profession. Dr. H.O. Westerdahl, Secretary General Emeritus of the college, was selected as the outstanding individual to be honored with the first videotape. The purpose of these tapes is to recognize those people who have contributed significantly to the dental profession. How great it would be if we had G.V. Black on an audiovisual tape. Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring back Pierre Fouchard, the father of modern dentistry? Another purpose of this project of the college is to explore the qualities of leadership. What makes good leaders? What qualities lead them to the top? And what can we and future generations learn from them? This program in the series of the Chronicles of Outstanding Leaders in Dentistry highlights the career of Maynard K. Hine. Dr. Hine is interviewed by Jane Giroux.
Dr. Maynard Hine, you have so many titles and such an impressive background that I'm going to ask you to tell us your current title.
Well, thank you very much. You must remember that I've been in this education business for over 50 years, so I do accumulate titles automatically, I guess. Currently, I'm Chancellor Emeritus of Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. And both of those titles need a little explanation. A chancellor has to be defined. In some universities, the chancellor is over all of the university. In others, there's a president over all the university, and chancellor is reporting to the president. So when I was active, I was in charge of all of the higher educational, public-supported institutions in Indianapolis, both Purdue University and Indiana University. So my title officially was Chancellor of Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis.
That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. Both universities had educational activities in Indianapolis for many years, but they hadn't actually combined until 1969. At that time, there was a drive to get an Indianapolis university, and it was felt that what we had there already, properly organized, would satisfy the needs of the city. So they created this monstrosity of two competing state organizations cooperating in Indianapolis as Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis.
Okay.
That's a long-winded explanation.
But well explained. You know, when I look at all of your titles and past presidents, we have a huge paragraph here of all of those, an editor and member of and honors received. There are so many. If you had to choose one thing that you think's been most meaningful to you, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
You mean after retirement? I mean,
no, the whole.
Well, the most important thing to me was when I retired.
Oh.
I expect probably the challenge of being chancellor would have to rate tops, because it wasn't a chance to pull together some rather independent units that had never cooperated together into one unit. Mm-hmm. And I think that would probably be the highlight. The second would be when I was appointed dean of the dental school. I was pretty young at the time, but I welcomed a chance to try my wings, and so that was also a highlight as far as I'm concerned. The others were other presidencies I've had more or less fit into the general pattern of the university assignments that I had.
We're going to talk a lot about your academic career and your involvement in associations, but first I'd like to talk a little bit about you and how you grew up, and if you ever anticipated the kind of career that you've had, and just look back a bit at what kind of person you really are.
I grew up in a small town in central Illinois, and since my father was a dentist, my nickname was always Doc. Well, I don't have a nickname now because where I'm living, too many people are doctors around. But no, I had no real idea of what I wanted to do as a youngster. I had a high regard for my father, who was an outstanding individual. But I used to say I didn't know what I wanted to do, but two things I was certain of. One, I didn't want to be a dentist, and the other, I didn't want to be a teacher. I ended up being both. But when I went into the university as for pre-dental, I found that I was attracted toward dentistry, and since my father was a dentist, he said he didn't mind, so I went into dentistry that way. And went into the University of Illinois in Chicago studying dentistry. Then after I finished, it was the depth of the Depression. I went down to practice with my father. It was in a town of about 2,600. There wasn't really enough to keep two dentists busy. We had a lot of trouble, which I might come back to in a minute and explain about it. I had a Rockefeller Fellowship offered to me in University of Rochester. I took that, got interested in academics and in research, got a job teaching it back at the University of Illinois, then went down to Indiana University in 1944 and became dean in 1945. My father finally said, "Son, I believe you're not going to come back and practice dentistry with me anymore." But I found it challenging, and apparently got along pretty well as an administrator and as a researcher, so I just stayed into the field. One reason that I left Tuscola to take this fellowship was because the banks were closed. It was the depth of depression. The first denture, full denture that I made, the patient paid me a chicken a week for 25 weeks, along with a dozen eggs, and we were glad to get it. So the challenge to stay there was very limited, and that's why I went into academics.
Well, needless to say, you've seen a lot of changes in dentistry, beginning with your father and seeing how he practiced. And
there have been a lot of changes, and most of them have been good, but not all.
Not all?
Actually, if we want to discuss progress in dentistry, that's a 2-hour lecture in itself.
I'm sure.
But there have been great advances since World War II. Things opened up in many directions right after the war. And I found it very challenging, and I guess maybe I was very lucky. In fact, looking back on it, the school that I went to was very small because all of the students had been called into the armed forces. And all of a sudden we were flooded with very fine young men who were eager to learn, no discipline problems, whatever. Money became available for research. The American Dental Association, in its wisdom, had begun to approve specialties. And so there was need for graduate education, so we expanded our educational program in many ways. And really, it was very easy to get money for research, get more faculty members to teach the specialties. We upgraded our faculty by letting them become graduate students, and things just went uphill in spite of the dean. I used to say all I did really was point the way that the faculty should go and then step aside and go. But you're talking about the great number of changes. When I went into dental school in Chicago, the University of Illinois, in 1926, I can remember yet one of the courses that I took was mechanical drawing. I don't suppose there's been anybody teaching in dental school, at least, mechanical drawing since. But I found that a very interesting course. I enjoyed it very much. Some of the schools at that time had the students make all kinds of instruments that they never did use, but the feeling was that they should know what an instrument would look like and how to use it. It came later. We did all of our laboratory work. We spent hours processing dentures. We learned how to make castings of all kinds and did a lot of laboratory work, which at that time was considered very important. The names of the courses that were taught are pretty much the same they are now. That is, biochemistry. I had biochemistry. It was taught by a man out of a textbook. We had microbiology, preventive dentistry, which was a series of 11 lectures is all. The difference in the curriculum between 1926, when I started, and 1945 as dean, and 1985 as it is now, is tremendous in scope, in depth. and many courses have been added, like behavioral sciences and courses that are really significant in dentistry, and they've dropped off a lot of the mechanical and technical procedures. But one thing I did notice that has not improved. Back when I went to school, our teachers were almost all part-time teachers, but they were dedicated individuals. They really wanted to teach. They had a high regard for dentistry, and they instilled in the student a feeling of importance to be ethical. I'm afraid that isn't always true at the moment. The students, until maybe 10 years ago, were looking at the income rather than at the necessity to serve. Mm-hmm. So that's one change that I felt was not to be commended. Mm-hmm. The teachers now are much better prepared. Most of them have advanced education. If it's in the basic science, it would probably be a PhD. Unheard of.
Is
back
that right?
in 1926, almost unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
When I came into Indiana in 1945, I was the only man on the faculty that had a degree different from a DDS degree. I had a Master of Science in oral pathology, and now practically all the teachers have. So the changes have been, in dental education, have been very striking. And as I said, most of them have been very good.
Mm-hmm. I would think there's been a lot of change, and that you all, of course, you've been especially involved in the academic environment, but when we talk about just the dentist in practice, watching your father and then you for a while, and
yes, there have been many changes in dental practice too. My father was an ingenious person, and he made his own casting machine to cast inlays, and I cast many of them on this machine that he made. But the investment procedures were very limited. The dental materials that the practitioner can use today is far superior to any they've had before. The young men going out now really don't realize, I'm afraid, how difficult it was back in the 20s and even into the 50s in many aspects of dental practice. When I went into dental school in 1926, the children's clinic, they used foot engines to make the burr go round, to prepare cavities. By the time I got into Indiana, they all were using electric motors to spin the burrs, and I expect it would be 8,000 revolutions per minute. In the mid-50s, somebody came up with the high-speed air rotors that would go 300,000 RPMs or something like that. Very rapidly cutting, very nearly painless, and it improved the productivity of the dental office tremendously. Then the use of dental assistants, the chairside assistants came along, and that made the dentist even more productive. Then the dental hygienists started coming in. In 1945, there was not a single dental hygienist in Indiana. We started a school, and now that we have a lot of them working around, and they help the dentist in productivity. So dental practice now is much more efficient, and the dentist can be much more productive than ever before. There's another aspect of dental practice that should be mentioned, and that is the prestige that the dentist has now compared to the 1900s and the 1920s. The first time that there was a commencement held in a university setting that gave it a dental degree, some of the audience laughed because they didn't consider it an academic discipline at all. Why bother to have it a graduation? Now, of course, the dental school is an integral part of a medical center, well respected and well accepted by the other disciplines. The public began to appreciate dentistry more. The appreciation for oral health increased remarkably for several reasons. Better education, well, the dentist could do things better, and as a result, they wanted more of it. Dental practice kept developing in the early and mid-60s, and finally in the early 70s. So the dentist didn't build a practice. He opened the doors and people rushed in. the expectations of the dentist practicing increased, so that they really expected to have at least 2 cars at the end of 5 years and a summer home at least in 10 years. Well, many things happened in dental practice in the mid-70s and 80s. One thing, the dental caries rate dropped. Not so many fillings were needed, particularly in children, for several reasons. Fluorides, for better education, better nutrition, perhaps better dental care. There were more dentists in the field, and they were more productive. And the economic situation was deteriorating. So in the late 70s and early 80s, the busyness of the dentist dropped. And many dentists were unhappy. They were not getting the income that they had expected. Many factors involved, and I don't think we need to explore them in great depth, but I think one of the problems was the dentist's expectations had gone up. After all, the 60s and the 70s, they were not normal or typical times. It was kind of a golden era for dentistry. And now in the late 70s and 80s, it has settled back, maybe more nearly what might be considered normal. As a result, there's some unhappiness. So when you're talking about the changes in dental practice, there have been many, and most of them have been good.
When you talk about the prestige and status and their expectations, I really sense from you that you feel a real strong commitment to the person, to that dentist, caring about other people as being a priority.
In 1985, there are many dentists practicing that have never been busier, and they're the ones that really have taken care of their patients. They have felt that it's a privilege to take care of the patients rather than the other way around. Several of our recent graduates went out into small communities, made themselves available 10 o'clock at night if necessary, or early in the morning, and they're busy. The people that got into trouble, at least some of them, had delusions that things were going to be easy. They would leave dental school heavily in debt. They would then buy a lot of equipment, sometimes not really needed to start with, and couldn't meet all the payments. A few of them have gone bankrupt, which is unfortunate, but I think it's because of lack of good judgment, because they didn't have the feeling that they must take care of the patient first. So that's a change that I have to put on the negative side a little bit.
But lots and lots on the positive, you mentioned.
Well, yes, yes. I'm high on dentistry. There are some prophets of doom that think that in the future dentistry is going to be a lot different, and I do too, but I don't think it's going to be all that bad. There'll be more group practices, perhaps. There will be more people working for someone else, at least when he first gets out of school, associating with another practice or something like that. And I think that's good. But I still believe that the dentistry future is going to be sound. And I still believe that not many of the people that are thinking about dentistry are going to shift and go become school teachers or something like that.
What about the faculties? How have they changed?
Well, back early on, the faculties were most of them part-time, and had no training beyond their experience in their office and in dentistry. But as I said a moment ago, many of them are trained now in special fields, become specialists to teach, and they're more full-time, more interested in research, and making a career out of teaching. So the faculty has been able to improve the educational system because they themselves are better educated.
And we have dentists now who have specialized in certain things also, don't we?
Yes, back when I started in the 20s, we had orthodontists, oral surgeons, and that's about all. There were a few periodontists, a few people around that were interested in just dentistry for children. But after the World War II, when the American Dental Association began to approve different specialties, And the specialists found the extra training that they could get in many of the dental schools, so they could become one of the 8 specialties that have been recognized. The specialties then came into the picture through graduate education. And that has been a great impetus in developing practice. Much of the research that's been done has been motivated by the specialists themselves. So that has been another wave after World War II, which has increased or improved the status of dentistry.
Think there'll ever come a time when we don't have cavities? Speaking as a person who has many.
Actually, I think I would have to say probably not. They can be reduced in number, and they in fact are now. Technically speaking, if a person would have an optimum diet, fluorides at the proper time, care along the way, know how to take care of their mouth, oral hygiene, and so forth. The patient should be able to keep his denture as long as he wants, or his natural teeth as long as he wants it.
That's wonderful.
There may be a cavity or two develop, particularly if someone likes to eat a candy bar periodically or something like that.
Oh, who would do that?
Well, not many people. Not many people would avoid it, I'm afraid. But the incidence of dental decay is dropping, and I expect that trend will continue.
I would think so. What about the difference in physical facilities in dental schools?
Well, actually, I went through the Oklahoma Dental School yesterday, and I was much impressed. It's a marvelously built, designed, equipped building, and I couldn't help but think back, because I knew I was going to talk to you today, about the kind of facilities that we had when I started in dental school. And we were not the worst dental school in the country. I mean, University of Illinois wasn't. For sterilization, we had vats about 4 feet long and maybe 10 inches square, fired by gas. It was boiling water. And we would take a tray and put the instruments in we wanted sterilized in there, supposedly for 15 minutes, although if we were in a hurry, I'm afraid the cheat had lived. There was no supervision of it. And somebody would put in contaminated instruments right next to the sterile one. We'd pick that out and take it over to a registered nurse who would set up a sterile tray. Now they have a much better system and much more controlled. The students get the sterile instruments ready to go. They don't have to do it themselves. So the physical facilities have been markedly improved in practically all the dental schools now. And most of the youngsters today wouldn't appreciate at all what we had to deal with back in the 20s.
I'm sure there's a
So the facilities have really been another advancement along the way. And the same thing is true, of course, with the equipment that the dentist has in his office. He has much better equipment to work with.
Oh yeah, I'm sure the offices look entirely different than. How have dental societies contributed to the progress of dentistry?
I'm biased a little bit, but I felt all my career that the dental societies and the dental schools should work closely together. And the American Dental Association, under the leadership of Dr. Harold Hillenbrand, has really developed, did develop into a dramatic force for improvement of dentistry. The American Dental Association set up standards for dental schools, accreditation of dental schools, and they would go in and approve by periodic inspection the curriculum, the faculty, the libraries, and if they weren't up to standard, they would put them on provisional approval or not approve them. So the schools were motivated to keep the standards up. They also set up standards for dental materials so that the dentist could find out which dental materials had been studied, been certified, and they would have more confidence in them. The American Dental Association was responsible for the creation of the National Institutes for Dental Research. And they fought for the budget for many years. And that has been a dramatic force in increasing the research facility, research funds available for dental schools and for dental research in general. And they cooperated with the National Bureau of Standards, the ADA did, in order to keep them interested in the dental problems. They also helped in the field of public education. as well as dental education. So the American Dental Association has been really a vital force in upgrading the status of dentistry. And since that is true, I have felt over a long time that the educators should work with them. And we've had a good rapport, until recently at least, between education and the American Dental Association. One of the trends that bothers me now a little bit is a feeling on the part of many practitioners that the educators have not been cooperating or not cooperating with them. And I think that's unfortunate, because everybody's working for the same goal, to improve the health of the public. And while the ADA might approach it one way and the practitioners another and the dental schools another, basically they should get together. And in my opinion, when these people tend to go in different directions, I think that that's unfortunate.
I think so. What about dental research activities? How have you noticed the changes
That has increased dramatically as well. Recently, there's been a little more difficulty getting kinds of funds that they need, but not only the scope, but the depth, if I may use that word, of the research. People are, just last week, or the week before last, I was in Las Vegas at the meeting of the International Association for Dental Research. And I was amazed at the numbers of people that were there doing research of interest to dentistry and the scope of it. I went to several lectures that I could understand, but most of them I couldn't. They're using techniques and materials to open up new vistas for dentistry that were unheard of 15, 20 years ago. So there has been a great increase in the scope of dental research and in its comprehensiveness.
Where do most research funds come from?
Well, most schools allow their full-time faculty, or all their faculty probably, to do some research. So the schools support some research. Government, through the National Institute for Dental Research, supports a lot of research. And then many schools report or get funds from commercial concerns, concerns that are developing products of interest to the public or to the dentist, and they support research that will improve their products. The school I'm closest to has had grants from Procter & Gamble for many years that has carried on vital research in the field of preventive dentistry. So those are the general sources of funds for research.
What changes have you noted in dental journalism? You've been involved in a lot of writing.
Yes, I have, and I rate dental journalism as very important in the scheme of educating the practicing dentist. And there have been many more journals in recent years. They are much better prepared. The first article I wrote included one colored photograph, which was unique. Now they use all kinds of color. Incidentally, one of the changes in education has been the improvement of teaching aids. Every school has facilities for preparing colored slides to illustrate dental diseases and these sort of things. Many of them are using television for teaching, and that has been an impetus also in improving the teaching in dental schools.
Are there people specifically trained in dental journalism, or do they come from one or the other?
Not really, I guess. Most of the editors are dentists that have a flair. The editor of the Journal of the American Dental Association is a dentist, but he also writes well, and so most of them do not get, they get special training maybe after they become editors, but not being trained just for editors.
Not during that time period. Why did you make the decision to pursue an academic career?
Well, it was a matter of many different forces, I guess. One was the challenge that came along. The economic situation when I was ready to practice was not encouraging me to go into practice. And frankly, I guess maybe I found out that I had a little more ability in that regard than going into an office every day and meeting patients that come in. Dental practice many times has to be a compromise from the ideal. The patient comes in with teeth that are badly broken down, and it's hard to restore them completely. Many times the patient's financial situation is such that you can't really do what would be nice to do. So it's frustrating a little bit to many dentists. In fact, many dentists get their pleasures in life out of what the dental practice will buy rather than the dental practice itself. And I sensed that too. And then as things opened up for me in the general field of administration and dentistry and so forth, I just never did get around to going back into practice.
Going back. So it's certainly a decision that you're glad that you made.
I'm sure that if I had to do it over, there will be one difference. I'd do it quicker. Quicker?
Okay. You've been such a leader in so many capacities, and in listening to you talk, I also hear a negotiator of sorts, because it seems that wherever you've been, you've pulled people together and really believe in working as a whole and as a team rather than just little units here and there.
Actually, I think there are many qualities that a leader should have, and one of them, as far as I'm concerned, is ability to motivate people, to pass on responsibility to others, and make things available for them to do, and then let them do the work.
Do you think, as a motivator of others, is that something, and do you think that's a skill that you've learned, or do you just feel that you've always kind of been that way?
I don't know that I can answer that. I'm many times asked by young people that would like to get into administration, what do you do to become an administrator, or what special skills should you have, and so forth. We're looking for a new dean at Indiana University School of Dentistry. I'm on the search and screen committee, and they asked me to describe the qualities that I thought might be of value to a dean. So I jotted down quite a number of them. After going through the list, first of all, I said he should be competent, certainly, and should know the field. He shouldn't be in charge of a unit unless he understands something about the unit itself. Dedicated, enthusiastic, quite persistent. He shouldn't give up easily, keep working. Courage of his convictions, communicate well, and then from a personal point of view, he should have a pleasing personality, he should be cooperative and poised, self-confident, sympathetic, robust health. And after making this list, I decided I should add, and it would be helpful if he could walk on water. Really, there is no, in my opinion, no classification of talents that a leader must have. Some leaders have one, some have another, some have many, and some have few. The main thing, I think, is ability to adapt to the situation, to be able to analyze and organize things, and then be able to delegate responsibilities and motivate people. And that's probably the full story, because I know a few administrators that are not dignified, and I know a few administrators that have no sense of humor, and I know a few administrators who are difficult to get along with, but still do well. So I think basically it's necessary for the real administrator to fit himself into the pattern, use the talents that the faculty have, and build them up whenever they can. Cooperate with them, and hope for the best.
Hope for the best. That's it. You know, you sound like a very positive person, and obviously have a great sense of humor. Is there any personal philosophy that? Well,
one of the things that worries me a little bit is if people think that I'm a little too cocky or whatever. I think one of the diseases that affects most deans is that they feel that they must comment on everything and maybe be an authority on everything. And I learned very early that that wasn't the way to do it. I'd been dean only a couple of weeks when one of the faculty members came in, the chairman of a department, and said, "We're out of pumice. What grade of pumice should we buy?" And I looked at him, I said, "I have no idea. If you don't know, I'm going to have to get a new chairman of the department." I realized right quick that I didn't know all the answers, although earlier on, the deans were dictatorial, and they controlled about everything, and they were expected to know, I guess, everything.
Everything.
But not this one.
But it sounds like that role has changed along with a lot of other things.
Yeah, oh yes, I think that's right. The dean today has a much more difficult problem than they did back, well, even in the 40s when I started. The dean must consider student body, faculty, alumni, legislators, colleagues in other schools around and so forth, and staff. And you can't ignore any of them without getting a little frown here and there, or an actual revolt some other way. It's much more complicated now. Back when I started, I expect if I would put on the bulletin board that I wanted all the students to come in the next day barefoot, they'd do it. They would be afraid not to, but no more. I'm not sure that I could even do it then, and I wouldn't try it. But the point I'm trying to make is that the modern dean is more of an implementer in many, many situations than he is a dictator. He's just sort of in between. Deans become middlemen. They try to get money, give it to someone. If they can't get the money, they can't give it. If they do get the money and give it to faculty, and the faculty don't do anything, nothing happens. So it can be a frustrating assignment. And the tenure of deans in this day and age is a lot shorter, in my opinion, than it has been in the past. The turnover is more rapid. Deans become disenchanted, frustrated, discouraged, and go back to teaching or go into practice.
What has your personal life been like throughout all of this busy career of yours?
I've had, I think, a very satisfying personal life. I have 3 children, and they're all fine children, and I have 4 grandsons, and they happen to be the better grandsons in the West. They're very good students, and no problems at all. The age is between 10 and 14, and I've had a great number of friends around and acquaintances throughout the country. I'm quite pleased.
Any of your children or grandchildren interested in
Well,
dentistry?
the grandsons all think they want to be dentists now.
All?
But none of my children did. My grandchildren will change their mind, of course, but now they think that sounds like a good occupation.
Well, I'm sure you've had a nice influence on them.
I think maybe so.
Okay.
We were talking a moment ago about changes that have occurred, particularly recently, and I wanted to comment a little bit on changes in the dental schools themselves from the point of view of student applications. There has been a decrease in the applicant pool in the last several years that is getting to be somewhat discerning. Some dental schools have closed. One dental school is closed, and others may close in the future. I think this decrease in the applicant pool is in part due to the fact that the dentists throughout the country, many of them are discouraged. They're not encouraging the students to go into dentistry because of the lack of busyness. Many of the youngsters are realizing that the big income that they used to get or expected to get is not available. And so the young men who are motivated primarily to go into dentistry because of easy life and a lot of money are going elsewhere. That's not all bad, incidentally, because if the man comes in with one thing in mind, and that is to make a lot of money, I don't think he's going to be quite the kind of dentist that somehow I would like to see. I think that basically a good dentist has to have a strong ethical component, wants to do right by his patients and wants to serve them, and incidentally make a good living. Obviously, I wouldn't want a man to give dentistry away. He is entitled to and should get a good fee. But that shouldn't be the main motive, in my opinion. And so this drop in applicant pool may not be all bad, because the people who are applying are those who are sincerely interested in dentistry, in my opinion. It's spotty. Indiana and Oklahoma here have full classes. They're both reducing the numbers a little bit because we don't think we need to run a capacity when the demand for services isn't high. But it's, in other schools, quite a problem. They don't get the applicants that can handle a strong academic program.
Have you noticed any other changes in the student applicants or in?
Well, one thing, there are many more women in dental schools now. You know, in Europe, well, in Russia and some of the other countries, the preponderance of people in medicine and dentistry are female. In this country, until, well, back before the 1960s, it was about 2% women, and the rest of them were male. Now, at least in Indiana, this last year, we had 38 women out of 115. And that's, in general, the percentage of women has gone up appreciably. Part of that is because people are realizing that dentistry is a good occupation for women, and partly because everywhere women are asserting a little more their willingness and their ability to invade areas that in the past were considered mainly masculine. However, there have always been some good women dentists.
Is that right?
At the University of Illinois, when I went in 1926, the chairman of the pedodontic department was a woman. And it happens in my class, there were 5 women out of 40, which was unusual. They weren't all graduated, but 2 of them were outstanding students. So there have been some women in this country, but they've been very limited, very few. So that's a change in the student body that is quite noticeable. And incidentally, we don't know just what effect that's going to have on the productivity of the dentists of the future, because many of these women will be only part-time. Many of them will step aside to raise a family and then come back part-time. So when you try to estimate how many dentists we're going to need by the year 2000, you have to put into the big computer all kinds of factors, and that's one of them.
Certainly.
One other thing, the students also now are much better prepared than they were 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. In 1925, I could have gotten into a dental school without any college work at all. In 1926, I think all of the schools required 1 year of pre-dental. Then it moved up to 2, and now the average would be 3 or 4 years of pre-dental before getting into dental school. So the dental students of this era are much better prepared than those of the couple generations ago.
We were talking about research a minute ago on Procter & Gamble. You said the development of Crest toothpaste and its effect on toothpaste advertising, you have a particular interest in.
That's an interesting story to me. Back in the 40s and 50s, there was a new dentifrice that was coming out every few months, claiming all kinds of marvelous things, and after a while disappearing. Well, in the American Dental Association in the early 50s, mid-50s, developed a series of guidelines that would have to be met by any product that would be used by the patient before it could be accredited by the Dental Society. So this slowed up a lot of this overnight wonders that were appearing in the marketplace. And so one or two of the companies decided that they would meet these requirements, and one of them was Procter & Gamble and Crest. That was done at our school, and they carried on some rather significant research, and it indicated that their product would reduce dental decay an appreciable amount. Well, this put the American Dental Association's Council on Dental Therapeutics in a little bit of a corner. They had set up standards, they were being met, and so they felt they really had to move. Obviously, the other dental manufacturers were somewhat upset by the fact that Crest was approved, and there was a lot of criticism leveled at the American Dental Association because they did this. Indiana University gave exclusive rights, IU held the patent, to Procter & Gamble, and that angered the other people because they said, if this is so good, you should make it available for all the manufacturers. And there was a pretty tense time there for a few months. But Indiana University felt, since Procter & Gamble had supported this research for many, many years, since Procter & Gamble was in a position to distribute it widely, if it had been a small company that couldn't, that would be something different, they decided to stay with it. As a result, however, of this approval, the other companies got busy and carried on research, and now there are several dentifrices that are approved. But I think the development of the American Dental Association standards and CREST meeting those standards set a new tone to the advertising of the dentifrice to the public. And I consider it a rather significant happening, if you want to call it that, in improving the status of advertising in dentistry. Unfortunately, the recent months, the American Dental Association has apparently been forced to accept advertising from non-accredited products. I believe there was a feeling that it was restraint of trade or something like that. So currently, the ADA, in my opinion, has been forced to slip back a little bit in the control of this advertising by the people who are afraid of restraint of trade.
That's interesting.
It's we'll see how it works out, but I'm a little unhappy that you can walk into an ADA meeting and see products on display being sold to the dentists that do not have the accreditation of the ADA.
You have something over here that I want you to show.
Oh.
It's a completely switching gears, but then switching gears is appropriate for the Spark Plug Award.
Of course, anybody that comes from Indianapolis has to be aware of the fact that the largest single sporting event of the world is held on Decoration Day, the 500-mile race. And the International College wanted to give an award a few years ago to an individual who had been dedicated service to the International College. So it occurred to me that we might make it a spark plug award, and this is the award. It is a spark plug from the car that won the 500-mile race that year, and we call it the spark plug. It's the H.O. Westerdahl Award. He was a longtime secretary of the International College, and the spark plug award. It's true that this did come from.
How'd you go about getting the actual spark plug?
I was trying, I can't remember who won that race this year, so I don't know whether this was Parnelli Jones or whosoever. Well, we have many faculty members and students who work on the 500-mile race during the race itself. And I talked to them one day, and they put me in touch with the people that supply spark plugs, and they were overjoyed to give me some. And so each year I get a supply of spark plugs from the race car. It's a little unique. And
is it given annually? Or?
Annually, yes. I have nothing whatever to do with the selection of the individual getting the award. My responsibility is to see that the award is made. The plaque itself is prepared by a dental faculty member who is a Filipino dentist that came over here and is a remarkably clever artist. And also very cooperative. So I go in and tell him what I want on the plaque, and a couple of days later it comes back. And this looks like the individual. I mean, he's really a talented artist.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so that's the Spark Plug of the Year award.
That's great. You place a great premium on the dedication and the service end of dentistry, don't you?
I think that is essential. That's true. So that's the Spark Plug award.
Okay. As you've inspired a lot of people, I'm sure there were many people who inspired you and many role models for you growing up and as an adult. And are there any of those special people that you'd like to talk about? affected you?
Yes, I can think of many people who had quite an influence on my life. I have to mention my father first, because as an innovative dentist in a small town, he was a great help to me. I was just mentioning at lunch, I made the first radio we had. Of course, that was back in the dark ages when they didn't have radios. A little crystal set with a cat whisker to tune it and so forth. Dad came home one day and just handed me a vacuum tube, as we called it then. So I started over and made the first radio. We took an impression of a croquet ball, and then we reproduced it in plaster and wound wire around that. Then we took an oatmeal box and wire around that, and then put the croquet ball in that and turned it, and that's the way we tuned the radio. We read this somewhere, but it worked out very well. And so Dad was an inspiration to me in many ways. I'd think of a hobby I wanted to make, and he would help me with it. I also helped him in his office some. He taught me how to make castings and so forth. Very careful not to influence me, however, in what I wanted to do by way of practice, by way of teaching later or whatever. And so we were very good friends, and I had to count him as very influential. I had many teachers. I can remember one, J. Roy Blaney, who was an oral pathologist, a very, very dedicated, highly ethical individual that I thought I would kind of like to follow in his footsteps some. I have to mention Harold Hillenbrand. Harold Hillenbrand was a longtime secretary of the American Dental Association, and I got out of dental school the same year, in 1930. Different schools, but the same year. He went into practice with his father, and I went into practice with mine. Then he left practice finally. He got interested in first of all, Chicago Dental Society, and then the Illinois State Dental Society. And I worked with in the same societies. I worked with him. One year he was chairman of a committee, and I was the chairman the next year, and we were close together all along. Then when he became executive director of the American Dental Association, I had been appointed a delegate from Indiana, so I voted for him for this job, and I remind him every once in a while that I'm responsible for him getting there, which is not true. But then we worked together in the American Dental Association for many years, and I found him to be a very stimulating person to work with. Dedicated individual, very competent individual, excellent leader, tough, but did very, very good work. And he called me one day and asked me to be chairman of the Council on Dental Research, and we worked together. Finally, when I became president of the American Dental Association, he was the secretary, and I leaned on him very heavily. Then we started working in the international dental scene, and when I was president of that, he again was a loyal supporter to me. So I don't talk to him much about this, really, but I owe him a great lot. He's a stimulating person to work for, and I have the highest regard for him. There were a few others around. When I was in Tuscola, I got much interested in the Presbyterian minister. That was quite a stimulation to me. In fact, I debated for a few months whether to go into ministry or into dentistry. And this is not very important, but one summer, this Presbyterian school, Presbyterian church needed some money. So all of us helped raise money. And my Sunday school class decided to raffle off some cakes. And we made a fair amount of cash. And we were severely criticized by the Ladies' Aid Society for gambling in the church.
Oh, no.
I decided I didn't think I wanted to work in that kind of environment. Well, some friends of mine said that I wasn't called to be a dentist. I mean, to be a minister. Well, I guess that's right. I wasn't called. But this man was quite an influence for me, and I kept up correspondence with him for a long time.
That's
very fine gentleman.
The International College of Dentists is an honorary organization composed of dentists from throughout the world. The USA section of the college decided to record visually not only the history of the college, but also several leaders in our profession. Dr. H.O. Westerdahl, Secretary General Emeritus of the college, was selected as the outstanding individual to be honored with the first videotape. The purpose of these tapes is to recognize those people who have contributed significantly to the dental profession. How great it would be if we had G.V. Black on an audiovisual tape. Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring back Pierre Fouchard, the father of modern dentistry? Another purpose of this project of the college is to explore the qualities of leadership. What makes good leaders? What qualities lead them to the top? And what can we and future generations learn from them? This program in the series of the Chronicles of Outstanding Leaders in Dentistry highlights the career of Maynard K. Hine.
A lot of people influence our lives in growing up and as an adult and as a professional. I know many people have influenced you, and why don't you tell us some more about some of them?
I like to acknowledge the fact that I've been helped by many people in many different ways. One person comes to mind immediately is Herman B. Wells, a longtime president of Indiana University. He became president in 1938, and he was acting president for a while. He was a young man. The board of trustees came to him and asked him if he would be acting president, and he said, on one condition, that you will not consider me for the presidency. So Herman answered, well, I wouldn't accept it if I thought you would. But he did so well that they appointed him president at age 39, and he was president for 25 years. During that time, Indiana University really developed dramatically. It became a rather small Midwestern university in a small town to one of national, even international reputation. It happens that I was appointed dean by Herman Wells, and I worked with him quite closely, and found him to be a very fine educator and a leader. To make the story complete, he retired, and another president came in, and then something happened, and Herman had to go back as an acting president for a while. And during that time, I was appointed chancellor. So I have to tip my hat to Herman B. Wells. He had a helper with him, Herman Briscoe, who was really an academician, and was a great help to me also in learning a little bit about the technicalities of being an administrator. Before that, I'd had practically no experience, and I was very pleased to work with him. Then there are several other people around. One of the men quite active in the International College for many, many years was a man named Dr. Hugo Kuhlstadt, who was quite influential in my life in many ways. I enjoyed working with him. Harry Lyons. I mustn't forget Harry Lyons. He was a longtime dean at one of the dental schools in the East, the president of the American Dental Association a few years before I was. When I saw him at the last meeting of the American Dental Association, I went up to him and said that I had always wanted to be the oldest living past president. And why wouldn't he cooperate? So he went around telling, you know what Maynard Hine said? And I got a letter from him about 2 weeks ago saying that he just had a physical and his blood pressure was 136/70, and he gave all of the rundown. He said, I'm sorry, I can't cooperate. I am going to tell him that I have done a little research in this field, and I have found that there's no advantage whatever of being the oldest of anything. I'm going to stop this kind of a problem. But he's a remarkable person. We worked together on many occasions, and he's a role model that we have. I think one of the problems that we have are not enough people around to be role models like Harry Lyons. Then there are many faculty members that have done remarkably well, and you know, a dean sometimes gets a little reflected glory from his faculty members. Ralph Phillips, who is probably the best known dental materials man in the world, travels around everywhere. This last few months ago, he had to make a speech in northern Italy. He left on Friday, was back in his office on Monday, and in between time he had flown over and then taken somebody picked him up and took him to this meeting and back. Completely foolish, but he's the kind of person that really spreads the gospel very well in the dental materials, and that reflects honor and glory on the dental school, and incidentally the dean. And Bill Schaefer, the oral pathologist, author of one of the best oral pathology textbooks in the world, bestseller, developed a very fine graduate program in oral pathology, and has many students, chairman of departments in other fields. Incidentally, that textbook that's the best in the world happens to be written by Schaefer, Hine, and Levy. I tried to get out of that a couple of years ago. I was embarrassed because I haven't been interested in pathology lately, but the publishers wouldn't let me. They said if you change the name, it means a new ball game as far as the book's concerned. So that's still. And then there's a man named John F. Johnston who been dead now a few years, but he brought into the dental school much discipline in a very important field of fixed partial and partial prosthodontics. He's tough. Many of the students didn't like him at all because he made them hew the line. But last February, I went into Chicago to a meeting of the John F. Johnson Study Club, and there were about 60 of his students from all over the world that had come back to meet and honor Johnny Johnson. So he brought honor and glory to the dumb dean and to the dental school. And there are others. Our present dean, who is now retiring, nationally known, internationally known. He just got back from Japan. They're getting cooperative venture between a Japan Dental School and Indiana University. And so when you talk about the success of an individual, you have to give credit to people that help bring that credit. And I could give you a long list, but this is an example of the kind of people that have really built up Indiana University School of Dentistry. Dentistry itself, and incidentally, you know, students used to think dumb dean was one word, and I do too. But it's been quite dramatic in the way these people have worked, and all I did really was give them the opportunity, and they did the work.
When you look at all of those different people, do you see any correlation or thread or sameness of character?
Oh, they're all different people in many ways, but I think enthusiasm for their subject and knowledge for their subject would have to come high. They are so eager to teach what they know and find out new things, the whole group, that I think that has to be considered as really basic to them. They're also all of them vocal, all of them in good health, or were in good health, excepting Will Schaefer, unfortunately, recently. But they were willing to give a lot of themselves and not stay in their own little bailiwick and work, but go out and spread the word. And I commend them for it.
If there were a child or even a young student or even a college-age student that came to you and asked, you know, what qualities do you think I should have to have an interest or be a successful dentist or be a successful administrator in the dental field?
Its question comes up quite often, and it is difficult to give a precise answer. I usually tell them, first of all, they have to be willing and like to work with people. If they are interested in basic research dealing with test tubes, they wouldn't be happy in dentistry. They have to, they really should have some understanding of how to coordinate hand and eye. Most dentists learn this, but sometimes it's very difficult for people, and they have to. I like to have them come in with some ability to coordinate hand and eye. They have to be alert. They can't get in if they aren't good students. And then I'd like to think that they have pretty high ethical standards. I find this difficult to assess because the cleverer the man is, the better answers he can give to the interviewer. But if there's any way that we could measure the dedication that a person has and his sense of ethics, that ought to be on our list of requirements for admission. It's something that can't really be taught. It can be. You can point out the importance of ethics. You can talk about how it could be developed. But unless they have a basic understanding of what's right and what's wrong, It's pretty hard to do anything in dental school. The really clever ones will keep it hidden until they get out, and then occasionally we have a foul ball. It does go through, and we're always sorry, but I don't know how to prevent it.
Yeah, I can't imagine. What do you think the future holds for dentistry?
Well, I am not a prophet of doom. I have the feeling that the golden age as we knew it in the 60s and 70s is not going to come back, at least very soon. I think there is a great need for dentists. I think they have much to offer. I would not hesitate to encourage a young man to go into the field. I would tell him immediately that he will not be a millionaire, that he will have a chance to serve. It's a very satisfying kind of an existence to most people. And I am convinced that this flurry right now of lack of busyness and criticism that one department is having, one division of dentistry is having with another, will fade out. We need some strong leadership in dental education and the dental society to see that this does happen, rather than drift apart, as I'm afraid has been happening in the last decade or so. So I think the future of dentistry has much to encourage people, and I am confident that there will always be a need for good dentists.
I'm sure even though you're retired, I know you're still very involved and very active, but what are some of the things that fill your time?
Well, I have more hobbies than I can shake a stick at, I guess. I have always expected to have a heart attack, and then when I'm recuperating, I'll get out my stamp collection and bring it up to date. I used to consider myself a philatelist, but in recent years I've been a stamp saver. I put things in, I'm going to work on them later, you know. And but I do enjoy that. It's been over the last 50 years I've been interested in stamp collecting. I do some gardening. Not too much, but I enjoy puttering around in the yard. I also am interested. I do a little sketching. Not too good, but I enjoy that, and I have made a few drawings around. But I also spend some time in history. Several years ago, I was asked to make a speech in Cleveland on Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And just for fun, I thought, well, I'll talk a little about Abraham Lincoln's teeth. So I went to the library, couldn't find anything. I thought that's a little odd. We know a lot about George Washington's teeth, made out of wood, which they weren't. But I mean, all kinds of things have been written about, but not a thing about Abraham Lincoln's teeth. So I got digging a little deeper. And I could talk for some time about what I found out. I consider myself now the world's authority on Abraham Lincoln's teeth.
The world's authority.
Because we don't know anything about it.
Oh.
Not really. He had 119 photographs taken, and not a one of them showed his teeth. Well, that's not too unusual, because in those days photography was, you had to pose and this sort of thing. But he was killed by a shot through his head, and the autopsy report, which I read, didn't mention his teeth at all. He had, apparently I have found recorded four visits to a dentist, and that's all by Abraham Lincoln, which makes one believe that perhaps he had pretty good teeth. Well, he was a thin fellow. They know a lot about his diet, and it was anti-carcinogenic. He ate sparsely. He would occasionally eat a pie, but not very often. He bought a toothbrush in 1842. His wife, when she was in the White House, signed a testimonial for a dentifrice. It was published in one of the newspapers, which was quite commonly done at the time. So one would have to conclude that he was really endowed with pretty good teeth. He did have a dentist named French, Dr. French in Springfield, but he had no record of ever having treated Abraham Lincoln. He treated Abraham Lincoln's family, according to his records. But he only put down records if the patient didn't pay. So Lincoln may have gone in and seen him, but paid the bill.
Paid.
In 1862, he had a toothache, and he went to a dentist in Washington, D.C., named Dr. Wolfe. And Wolf said the tooth would have to come out. This has been recorded in the dental journals. So Lincoln said, wait a minute, and he took out of his pocket a bottle and whiffed it for a while. And then he made a sign, and Dr. Wolf took out the tooth and reported that the tooth was taken out without pain. The bottle contained chloroform. Well, chloroform was known as an anesthetic at that time, but not generally used. The question arises, was Abraham Lincoln a chloroform sniffer? He had two sources that he could have, where he could have got the chloroform. One was the Surgeon General, who was a friend of his in Washington. And then he had a dentist friend in Chicago that had used chloroform for extraction. That's where he got the chloroform. But Abraham Lincoln grew up in southern Indiana and Kentucky. They used limestone spring water, and some of those had optimal fluorides in it. So the conclusions of my rather exhaustive study, and I think I have exhausted that. I can't go anywhere else. I've written to people and so forth. Oh, one other thing. One of the poets that saw him reported that when he told a funny story, which was often, he would throw back his head and laugh and show his white, even teeth, like yours. It may be that was poetic, and it may be that was an accurate description, but we have no good description of Abraham Lincoln's teeth. So my conclusion is that because he ate an anticarcinogenic diet, he probably had fluorides when he grew up. He knew something about oral hygiene. He hadn't gone to a dentist very often. He probably had good teeth. And you can't disprove it.
That is for
That's
sure.
why I'm an authority in the field.
Well, I believe you. I think it's real credible. It sounds like you did a lot of work on that.
I write a column in the Indiana Dental Journal every month called Hindsight. And the secret agenda in my writing this column is to point out that many things that we consider new today were really just rehashes, as it were, of what we knew many years ago. I read an article published in 1888 which described the marvelous advances that had occurred in dental science in the past, they said in the past 20 or 30 years. This was 1888. How they'd saved millions of teeth that would have been destroyed otherwise and kept the patients healthy and this sort of thing. And in the meeting I went to a couple of weeks ago, there were two discussions on the dangers of using silver fillings, amalgam fillings. The amalgam war was very active in 1840, and so I'm going to write a column on amalgam wars revisited or something like that. And I'm hoping I can find a quotation of 1840 that could be duplicated in quotations in 1985. There have been some things that have been with us for a century or two that many people now consider as brand new. So I'm enjoying doing a little history. That's one of my hobbies. When I get bored, I go to the library and drag down an old book and read how smart they were 100 years ago.
And all so many of the controversies that we have in all sorts of industries, I'm sure, have parallels somewhere back there.
That's true, and many of them are even older than that, older than 1840s. But that's far enough back.
Is there any particular time during, say, your time as dean that you recall as being especially stressful or problematic?
Not so much as dean, although in the early 60s, the students were beginning to be a little more active. But as chancellor, that was during the time when the activism on the campuses all over the country. I had my life threatened one day. We had one time 5 students came in that said they were going to leave until I gave them their demands. And I told them, sorry, I really couldn't do that. They said, we'll stay here till you do. So I had been told with the lawyer to put on the door a sign, this office closes at 5 p.m. So I said to the people, well, if you stay out of my way, you're welcome to stay until 5 o'clock. If you're here at 5, I have to call the police because we must close this building at 5 o'clock, and I pointed the sign. They stayed until 5 minutes to 5. They were just testing me. And if I'd have capitulated, they'd been back later with another demand. When we had a dedication of one of the buildings, this was during the period while I was chancellor. They had many buildings going on. It was a very active. Pickets went back and forth, and we ignored them. But we were lucky because our IUPUI, Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, was a campus in the city. And most of the students were married or were older. They didn't want to bother with this nonsense that the youngsters were doing on the radical type, and they weren't very tolerant of them. When that 5 people were in my office, they called around trying to get other people to come in to support them, and they wouldn't do it. They didn't want anything to interfere with their education. So that was a stressful period, really. But I considered that we were quite lucky compared to what happened on many of the campuses throughout there. And that's changed now. Most of the schools, most of the kids, believe it or not, have haircuts, dress more neatly, and are really interested in an education, much more than they were back in the late 60s and early 70s. We had other stressful incidents. Many times I had to call in students and tell them a little bit about what they were doing wrong. I usually forgot it. But in the last 2 or 3 years, many of them come and said, "Do you remember?" and I don't. But
they do.
When I was chancellor, one of the nurses was going to be kicked out of school. She came over and cried on my desk, and so I worked out a way for her to stay in. Don't remember her name, forgotten completely, but about a month ago I got a letter from her. She was practicing as a nurse in Mexico in a small community, and she said that, pardon me, she had never gotten around to thanking me for that. She felt guilty because she said, yeah, I was able to keep her in nursing school. She got out and is now making quite a contribution into this little town in northern Mexico. So we have our troubles, but there are some rewards go along with it too.
I think there are a lot of rewards in knowing how many lives you've touched.
I was telling somebody a story just today about one of my students came up to me last fall, dental students. Said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "Sorry." He said that I had almost kicked him out of school. And he said that I had a reason to. He said I was off base and I shouldn't have done it. But he said, "You worked it out for me to finish." He went out, he straightened up his life. He got in the Army, and he was in Vietnam. And he saved the life of a soldier by doing a tracheotomy with a ballpoint pen. Well, I read an article about that a few years ago in the journal, but I had no idea it was this guy. But that's one of the things that I think I ought to get a medal for saving the life of a soldier, and I just didn't leave Indianapolis. Oh, there are rewards working with these students. Many of them appreciate it, some don't. But if a person really is interested in working with students and helping them, things have to work out sometimes. It's a rewarding experience.
Is there anyone else that you'd wanted to thank or to mention?
Oh, I really meant to do this earlier, and it just didn't work out. I have been impressed with the plan of the International College to put some of these things in the archives. I think my only reason for being here is because I've been around so long. But one of my activities since I retired has been working with the archives of IUPUI, and there is a great need to put on the record things that don't seem too important now perhaps, but may in the future be quite significant. So I think the International College and the local committee is to be commended for their foresight commended for their foresight in getting this kind of a project underway. I challenge their judgment on some of the people they're inviting, I mean one person that they're inviting. But I do think it is a worthwhile project, and I commend them for it, and will hope that they really keep working as well as they are now, because it's a great project. Well,
in conclusion, Dr. Maynard Hine, you're very humble. You have a wonderful sense of humor, and I know they chose you for some outstanding qualities and contributions that you've made.
Well, you're too kind, but as the saying is, I'm humble because there's so much I should be humble about.
Well, thank you for taking the time to
Thank
do
you.
this.
It's been pleasant to be with you, and I hope that it hasn't been too boring.
It's been wonderful. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks very much.